Good morning, friends. Today we will focus our discussion on power, domination, and authority. We have already initiated this discussion, and this is in continuation to my last lecture. Weber did not think political parties and democratic politics would be able drastically to effect social reform or bring about greater economic equality. He distinguishes between patronage parties, which were concerned primarily with gaining power and dividing up the goodies between themselves, and second, parties of principle, which ended up through a process of bureaucratization, doing much the same thing. Here, Max Weber is trying to demonstrate on the basis of his data that in principle there can be two types of political parties. One he terms patronage parties, which were concerned primarily with gaining power and dividing up the goodies between themselves. And second, he says there can be parties of principle which, until and unless in opposition, remains a principled party, but once it comes to power, it also ends through a process of bureaucratization, doing more or less the same thing which patronage party does in liberal democracies in the capitalist mode of production. And then Weber says parties too become status groups pursuing their own self-interest. Following Robert Mitchell's discussion of political parties in the published in the year 1991 and then translated into English in 1962, Weber says that such ideals inevitably become displaced. He's talking about party of principle, and he's relying on the insights provided by Robert Mitchell in the book Political Parties, published in the year 1911 and translated into 1962. Weber says that such ideals inevitably become displaced. Weber also believed that as the political party is organized, So the maintenance of the organization itself takes priority over the original ends, and an inevitable process of bureaucratization takes place. Here we find a strange determinism in Max Weber's position, because Weber had earlier said that it is not socialism that is inevitable, mode of production. In other words, he was trying to criticize determinism in Karl Marx by saying that Marxist concept that socialism is inevitable mode of production given the contradiction within the capitalist mode of production. And Weber says that the mode of production does not necessarily determine politics. Given this stance, it is strange that in the analysis of politics, Weber comes to a similar determinism when he says that there is not much difference between patronage parties and parties of principles. Both end up in the same way in a bureaucratic routinization of principles. And he also says this bureaucratization also eats up the legacy of the charismatic leaders. Anyway, Weber thought that it is the process of rationalization that determines everything and not the mode of production. This is the basic difference between the two determinism. One determinism which we find in Karl Marx, that mode of production determines everything else. Mode of production is the base and everything is social structure. On the same lines, Weber says that it is the process of rationalization that determines everything. This process of rationalization is the base and everything is some sort of superstructure. Although he doesn't use these terms, base and superstructure, but what he said comes sociologically to the same position. I would like to say that both positions are complementary rather than contradictory, as many commentators like Jan Krab have claimed in their commentaries on Marx and Weber. Now, as we reanalyzed the concept of political parties, let us reanalyze the concept of corporate groups we had discussed in the last class. Weber says that corporate groups might be called a collective actor. It is a relatively closed group in which order is enforced by a number of individuals whose specific task is to do just that. Weber distinguishes between power, that is, the probability that one individual will have his or her orders carried out, and imperative control, By imperative control, he means the probability that a specific command will be obeyed. Here we find that he is introducing two concepts, one of power and the other of imperative control. And as I said just now, power is the probability that one individual will have his or her orders carried out. On the other hand, imperative control, according to Weber, is the probability that a specific command will be obeyed. Weber says that we cannot define a political corporate group from its purpose, but he says it is possible to define the political character of a corporate group only in terms of the means peculiar to it, that is, the use of force. Here Weber is trying to say that, the political corporate group is not defined on the basis of its purpose, its ends. Rather, the political character of a corporate group can be conceptualized, defined by means of a peculiar method or technique or means, that is the use of force. As I said earlier also, Weber is not so much interested in the goal of social action or the end of social action or the absolute purpose of doing a social action, including the action of exercising power. He says that the end is not that important in sociological analysis. Rather, it is the means to the end which is more important. Therefore, the political character of a corporate group can be understood only by analyzing the means political corporate groups use to achieve their end. And what is that means? The use of force. Particularly, they exercise imperative control. They try to command everything by using the force of capital. Then Weber says that under certain circumstances, the use of force can be elevated form to a means to an end in itself. He says that sometimes capitalists do not use force to achieve a particular end. Rather, they use force just to assert that they are sovereign in their own specific context. And this is what he means by under certain circumstances, the use of force can be elevated to an end instead of the means. Weber sees power as an autonomous factor over which struggles can take place. For Durkheim, the exercise of power was a function of the division of labor. For Marx, power was determined by social class and the state of the class struggle. Weber's conception continues true to Parsons and on to postmodernism via the connection to Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy that is known as the will to power, which replaces notions of morality or justice or equality or freedom. Weber also says that today the use of force is regarded as legitimate only so far as it is permitted by a state or prescribed by it. Prescribed by it, that is the state apparatus. Let us now turn our attention to Weber's more developed theories of power, domination, and the state as the provider of legitimate authority. The starting point for this is his typology of types of domination, that is charismatic, traditional, and rational legal. These are ideal types. You must have studied all these ideal types in the course on methodology of social sciences. In practice, the three types can coexist in any situation, but it is likely that one or the other will be dominant. Groups competing for power are always trying to transform the means at their disposal, and so in the modern society, in particular, there is an inherent instability in the form of domination. Power is understood today as the ability to bring about intended consequences. Theorists who talk of power structure or class power structure do not, for the most part, ascribe intentions to such agents. As we have seen, there can be different bases of power, for example, wealth, status, knowledge of a specialist, charisma, and authority given by the state to political actors or rational legal agencies like bureaucracy. There can be different forms of power such as influence, coercion, manipulation, force, and control. In the same way, there can be different ends of power or goals of power, such as individual or community ends, political and economic outcomes, and stable social and political orders. Definitions of power have also been deeply implicated in debates in social and political theory on the essentially conflicting, that is Marxist, or consensual, that is Durkheimian, nature of social and political order. Further disagreements concerns whether power is zero sum, for example, in the writings of Marx, Weber, or C. Wright Mills, or it is a positive sum concept as in the writings of Parsons since 1930 onwards. Now let us come to the concept of charismatic leadership and charismatic authority. Weber says in 1922, English translation in 1947, page number 358 and 359. He says that the term charisma will be applied to a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he is set apart from ordinary men and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers and qualities. These are such as are not accessible to the ordinary person but are regarded as of divine origin or as exemplary, and on the basis of them the individual concerned is treated as a leader. This type of power should be distinguished from power on the basis of charismatic authority. Here, Weber is trying to differentiate between charismatic leader as a person and charismatic authority as a post or a status which is available in different countries. For example, Jesus Christ among the Christians of Europe possessed charisma, and the disciples obeyed him because they knew him, and he was presumably a remarkable man. In contrast, the Pope of Catholic Church possesses an authority based on the charisma of Jesus, but without the personal qualities of Jesus. People obey Pope without knowing Jesus, except in some metaphorical sense, where Pope is regarded as the spiritual heir or descendant of Jesus Christ. Charismatic leadership can arise, according to Max Weber, at times of trouble. For example, enemy, the term Durkheim used when he was discussing suicide rate. Weber says that charismatic leadership can arise at times of trouble when other forms of domination do not seem to be fulfilling their task. It is a product of a collective enthusiasm which sees in this person, that is the charismatic person, a solution to the troubles that plague them, and the leader promises such a solution. There is a dramatic opposition between charismatic leadership and everyday life. Charismatic leader calls, leave everything behind, follow me, and we will save the world. Charismatic leadership is of the same sociological type, whether the activity of the movement is legal or illegal, morally good or bad. Jesus Christ, Adolf Hitler, Robin Hood, Mahatma Gandhi, all fall into the same category of charismatic leadership, although some are classified as good and some are classified as bad, some are classified as personally virtuous, some are classified as morally corrupt. But all these examples of Jesus Christ, Adolf Hitler, Robin Hood, and Mahatma Gandhi illustrate the category Weber terms as charismatic leader. Under such leadership, well-established rules, whether traditional or rational legal, are abandoned. For example, Marx has written a book, 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, not Napoleon Bonaparte, but his descendant, Louis Bonaparte. Bonaparte's coup, C-O-U-P, coup, according to Marx, came to personify the peasantry, the lumpen proletariat, and others who could not represent themselves. The charismatic leader represents the Durkheimian concept of the sacred and of collective effervescence. In this way, Marx and Durkheim present an alternative theoretical explanation where charisma is not inherent in the personal quality or attribute of the leader, but it is a quality projected on to a leader by virtue of a situation, opportunity, and events. Now, in case you take this discussion of charismatic leadership by Max Weber on the one hand, Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim on the other, it will be easier for you to understand the growth of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, Ayatollah Khomeini, and Deng Xiaoping in 1980s, that is from 1979 till 1989. You can also regard Mikhail Gorbachev, for good or bad reason, as the charismatic authority. Today, Narendra Modi of India, Vladimir Putin of Russia, Xi Jinping of China, uh, Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran, Pope Francis of the Catholic Church today, and the person who has just defeated Donald Trump of United States of America, they all will be regarded charismatic leaders. We can also see the example of Jayaprakash Narayan during the student movement of 1974, and he continued to be a charismatic leader until his death. There was a government which was formed under the leadership of anti-Indira Gandhi movement in late 70s from 1974 till 1976. And a government came in led by Morarji Desai and Chaudhry Charan Singh, which lasted from 77 to 79. The similar story was repeated during the Anna movement around 2012-13. Out of the Anna movement came a government of Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, led by Arvind Kejriwal. We cannot analyze what will happen after Narendra Modi or Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or Ayatollah Khamenei or Pope Francis, because they are still alive and very popular as charismatic leader. But we can easily analyze what happened to the legacy of charismatic leader Mahatma Gandhi, what happened to the charismatic leadership or legacy of charismatic leader Jayaprakash Narayan, and we can also analyze what happened to the legacy of charismatic leader Anna Hazare. Weber says that usually such charismatic leaders' legacy is routinized by manipulatory politicians who modify or distort the meaning of the message charismatic leader gives, and the bureaucracy represented by the political party routinize the charisma as rational legal authority. On the other hand, there is a traditional leadership. For example, the descendants of Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi represent a political nobility in India, and the common Congress workers accept them, that is Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi, as leaders, not because of their personal virtue or personal attribute, not because they led their parties to absolute power, as Indira Gandhi did in 1971 or 1980, or as Jawaharlal Nehru did in 1952 and 1957 and 1962, or as Narendra Modi did in 2014 and 2019. Therefore, today in the Indian context, Narendra Modi, whether you like him or not, whether you regard him as Jesus Christ or as Robin Hood, you regard him as Mahatma Gandhi or Adolf Hitler, but you cannot deny that today Narendra Modi represents charismatic leadership in India, whereas Arvind Kejriwal represents traditional legal authority who had benefited from the Anna movement. Anna Hazare was a charismatic leader, and the Nehru Gandhi dynasty, represented by Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, and Priyanka Gandhi, they represent the traditional leadership or traditional authority in Indian politics. In the same way, in case you take political character of corporate groups in India, whether you like it or not, today Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani represent charismatic corporate leaders, whereas Ratan Tata or Tata and Sons represent the traditional corporate leadership. Now, there are others, for example, those who manage Tata and Sons nowadays, or those who manage Infosys in Bangalore, they represent traditional legal authority in corporate circle in the market. Therefore, the three terms, charismatic authority and traditional authority, as well as rational legal authority, is analytically separable. You can understand them very easily in the empirical context, but as Weber says, the three of them coexist together in most societies, including the Indian society of today or any other society for that matter. Now the question is, what is the basic difference between traditional authority and rational legal authority vis-a-vis charismatic authority? We can underline the following points. Point number one, charismatic leaders have personal attributes. Their popularity is based on their inherent quality, or this is the Weberian definition of charismatic leadership, or as Marx says, that there is a very strange situation where there are political groups which think that they are not ably represented in the rational, legal, or traditional authority represented by the political class of MPs and MLAs. these people who make uh, one aspect of rational legal leaders, they do not necessarily win because they do not necessarily win election, that of assembly or parliament, necessarily because of their personal attribute. Rather, they are mostly elected because they are candidate of a political party, and that political party is led by either a charismatic authority or a traditional authority, but hardly by a rational legal authority, although there are few exceptions. For example, there are people who say that during the UPA rule, United Progressive Alliance rule from 2004 till 2014, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India, but he was not a charismatic leadership, nor was Sonia Gandhi, the chairperson of UPA regime, a charismatic leader. But what is the difference between Sonia Gandhi and Dr. Manmohan Singh? Sonia Gandhi represented traditional authority of the Nehru Gandhi dynasty, whereas Dr. Manmohan Singh represented rational legal authority of an elected uh, prime minister. Of course, this was not an election done by the parliamentarians of the United Progressive Alliance. Rather, he was selected out of the many possible choices by the party boss Sonia Gandhi. But Dr. Manmohan Singh was not an accidental prime minister, as many people talk about him. He was very much a rational legal leader because for a very long time he was part of the Indian nation state in the capacity of Governor General of Reserve Bank of India. Then he also worked in the capacity of an expert in economic affairs under different leaders of the Congress party. And then he was suddenly picked up as the finance minister of P.V. Narasimha Rao, who transformed India from the license permit Raj of Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi to a new liberalization uh, uh, policy, a new liberalization regime to accelerate the process of economic reforms or liberal reforms. Dr. Manmohan Singh was picked up as finance minister because, in the opinion of the political boss, who represented himself a rational legal authority within the Congress party, because their charismatic leader Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated during the election of 2091. Rao was picked up not because he was a natural leader of the Congress party during the 1991 election, because he was the compromise candidate of all the factions of the Congress party during the result of 1991 Lok Sabha elections. Now, since he did not have the mandate in his name, he was scared of a traditional politician as the finance minister in his ministry. He thought that since he is first among the equals and not the taller leader, which Rajiv Gandhi or Indira Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru were in their days, he needed somebody who followed his political directions or dictates or commands very, religiously as a rational legal authority. Therefore, uh, P.V. Narasimha Rao gave almost a free hand to Manmohan Singh as the finance minister. As a result, since 1991 until 2013, uh, Dr. Manmohan Singh was more or less in the same position in which P.V. Narasimha Rao was in 1991. He became the Prime Minister in the same way in which in which P.V. Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister in 1991. Therefore, Sonia Gandhi represented traditional leadership in 2004 till 2014, whereas Dr. Manmohan Singh represented rational legal leadership. In contrast, between 1998 till 2004, the leader of NDA, National Democratic Alliance, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, was regarded as a charismatic leader, whereas his party colleague Lal Krishna Advani represented the organizational strength of the party as some sort of, rational legal leadership of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Now, in 2014, Narendra Modi emerged as a charismatic leader, and now we have Amit Shah in the position of Sonia Gandhi or Lalu Krishna Advani. I'm not, equating the personal attributes of these three persons. There are three different types of people. Like Jyoti Basu and Buddhadev Bhattacharya were two different types of people. I'm just comparing and contrasting. If Jyoti Basu represented the charismatic face of the CPM in West Bengal, Buddhadev Bhattacharya represented, the rational legal successor of Jyoti Basu in the Left Front Alliance in Bengal. But Mamata Banerjee came as a charismatic leader. In the same way, we have, in Bihar, two different types of charismatic leaders. One, Lalu Prasad Yadav. He was certainly not in the league of Mahatma Gandhi or Jesus Christ. You can club him in the league of Robin Hood or Hitler. But he was a charismatic leader in his own right. Now, what is at the stake in this discussion about power, authority, and domination? And the question is very simple. There are two concepts which are being articulated by these authors on power. One is the Congress of legitimacy. What is legitimacy? Legitimacy is a term, which is used again and again by Max Weber, which thinks that the source of legitimacy is the law of the land or the law of the nation state. Whereas in the case of people like Narendra Modi or Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Hitler or Jesus Christ, the source of their power does not lie in the law, rather, it lies in the defiance of the law. Mahatma Gandhi became a charismatic authority because he broke the salt law of the British Raj. Namak Satyagraha किया था उन्होंने. It was a protest against the British law to make salt, and Gandhi broke it, and by breaking the existing law, he became a charismatic leader. In the same sense, Indira Gandhi became a charismatic leader because she became the first Prime Minister of India and also the last until now who defeated another country, that is Pakistan, and broke it into two parts, that is Pakistan and Bangladesh. In the same way, Narendra Modi's power, he did not become a charismatic leader by following the law in the way Manmohan Singh became the Prime Minister of India. Rather, he also broke the law, many laws, by using some sort of, a synthesis of the attributes of a lion and fox. I will not say Narendra Modi or Vladimir Putin, they are equals, in more than one way. And even Xi Jinping comes within this trio. Modi, Jinping and Putin, they are enjoying power for a longer period of time. First in their provincial capacity and then in their national, arena. And they combine a synthesis of the Foxian attribute and the attribute of a lion. And therefore, there is a need to revise the concept of power and authority in Max Weber. And I have used today three authors. One is Max Weber's, contemporary, Wilfred Pareto. Second is an earlier analyst, Karl Marx. And third is Emile Durkheim. There is a fourth person, Talcott Parsons, who is regarded as a follower of both Emile Durkheim and Max Weber. And he presented a different concept of power that is known as the power as a positive sum game. Before Talcott Parsons wrote his theory of power in 1960 and elaborated later on in his writings, people believed that there is a fixed amount of power in society. For example, people believe that there is 100 unit of power, and in case one person occupies 60% of the power, then there is only 40% of power which can be distributed in the whole nation state or society. Now, Talcott Parsons says that this is not correct. The volume of power can be increased. The volume of power can be increased, and he gave, the example of the banking. And, you understand today what is happening in the banking sector, not only in India, but also in United States of America. States are writing off huge loans taken by the capitalist class who took a loan in the name of investment for further production, but they used this for, living a luxurious life of a king, and they were unable to return the loan. Then this loan was written off. This is not only happening in India, but it is happening the world over because capitalism is undergoing a severe crisis, not for the first time, but definitely this is the most severe crisis which capitalism has faced in the world. Now, the question is whether this is what Karl Marx was predicting. I do not know. But one thing can be said that although power in the state or politics is still to some extent a zero-sum game. In case Narendra Modi had got absolute power, like Xi Jinping in China or Vladimir Putin in India, there is no power left for his ministerial colleagues to enjoy in these three countries. Therefore, Weberian or Marxian concept of zero-sum power is still relevant in the context of politics, but the same cannot be said about economy and the market because, as Talcott Parsons said, the banking system works in such a way that suppose you deposit, I am the bank, you deposit 100 rupees in my bank and I give 100 rupees in loan to Mr. X. The volume of power of money is increasing. It is not only 100 rupees which you deposited. There will be also interest which I will give on your 100 rupees, and I will also receive 100 rupees, interest on 100 rupees which I give to Mr. X or Y or Z. Therefore, the banking system works like cybernetics, where more volume of power can be generated, whether that is real or deceptive, is something which Talcott Parsons was not able to answer because these days money, either dollar or rupees in India, are not necessarily linked with the national domestic product or gold. Therefore, the national exchequer or national banks have power to print money as per their wish, and then there is more money in the market. Now, the power of money in the market today cannot be explained by using the concept of power which Marx was using, or even Durkheim was using, or even Weber was using. It can be explained only in the terms Talcott Parsons was elaborating in 1960, that power can be shared among all of us by increasing the volume of power, and this is possible by the new science of technology, the new science of cybernetics. Now, robotics is trying to surpass the cybernetics of Talcott Parsons. Therefore, technology has become a key player in the creation of wealth or money or power, and it requires a revision in the theory of power, status, authority, and legitimacy. Unless and until we revise it, some of the things which is happening around us in the global village cannot be explained in appropriate terms. Thank you.